Hey guys, there was a question on the live stream the other day that I missed when I was going back through and doing the table of contents. I saw a couple of questions, but I wanted to hit this one, and this was, how do you handle stress when you are low income? And I mean, money is one of the main things that causes stress, and there's really a two-part answer to this. I think the first one is whenever you, because of the situation, you're going into a low income situation. And I think that's typical because when you're married, you have this pool of money you're putting together, and then once everything falls apart, neither party is going to have the same amount of money that they had access to before. And that causes a tremendous amount of stress. It also creates a problem whenever you're having to acclimate to basically a new standard of living. And I know I struggled with that a lot. Actually, it was a two-part thing. What I'll tell you is in the beginning stages of my situation, when I was giving her a ton of money, all the bills were paid, even with that, I noticed that I was actually saving more money. It was really bizarre, and it was actually kind of a good indicator of, for me, of, another example of problems that were going on whenever we were married with spending. The problem in my situation, and I think this is really common, is once the court thing started, once they assessed what I had to officially pay and the way they were doing it, because initially I was just giving her money every time I got paid, but they're like, no, you're going to pay her on the 1st and the 15th. I don't get paid on the 1st and the 15th, so I was having to come up with money I didn't have and dip into accounts and stuff like that to make it work. And then add into that all the extra expenses of lawyers and court fees and just getting bombarded every time you turn around. On top of setting up a household and then realizing that you're in a battle, so it completely complicates and adds a whole heck of a lot of stress. That is not an example of low-grade stress of what I was talking about on the live stream. So here's the deal on how you handle, or in my opinion, how the best way to handle this with stress is you have to get yourself on a firm budget. And there's a couple of parts to that too, and this is something I struggle with as well, and that is not wanting to actually do the budget because you don't want to see what the numbers are. But it's really important to find out really how much money you have and what the real numbers really are. And the sooner you do that, the sooner you can make adjustments to what you're doing. And one of the problems that I had is, well, it was two-part, right? When I first moved out, I was so sick of TV and stuff that I didn't even, there was things I cut, but I wasn't a big deal. I was sick of the TV. I didn't have a TV, so I didn't have cable. I didn't have DirecTV or anything like that. I didn't even have a TV. But on that, there's other things that you have to look at to really decide, okay, what exactly can you spend money on? And the really tough part about this is if there were things you were able to do before, like you're able to go get a Starbucks coffee every day, you were able to go to lunch every day, or whatever the case may be, you're going to have to accept that at least in the short term, or short to mid-term, you're going to have to make changes. Now, in a video I made the other day, I was talking about that a little bit and how I was really fighting that. So I didn't, and as a result of that, I really kind of drove myself into the ground because of it. And the main thing on it was I was so irritated of the situation. I was so frustrated with what I felt the ex was able to get away with and how unfair it was. Plus, like I said before, I really thought that she was going to have to get a job, things were going to change, and that the child support would go down. So I was like, okay, well, I have this much money, but it's going to go to this. And I was wrong on that. So the first part about it to really get a handle on the stress of that is figure out how much money you have. Do not plan on raises or child support going up or down depending on how it impacts you. Find out what those numbers are and create a budget for it. If you guys have looked at, I think it's Dave Ramsey, I think he talks about doing the envelope method to where you have different categories that you put money in, and that's what the bill is for, and that's what you do. Why I was doing this for a long time, and it really was helping me when I really finally decided I had to make a change, I had a hard budget, I tracked every dollar, and I'd made an itemized list of every category that I had, and I stuck to that budget. I mean, I had a hard food budget, I had a hard gas budget. I started changing the way I would do things. I wouldn't go Yeah, I live out of town, so to go into town to do things I wouldn't do because I didn't want to spend the money on the gas, and I didn't have a budget to do things. And then at the end of the month, or not the end of the month, but at the next payday, I took whatever was left and I took it out and I basically crammed it in an envelope, and that's how I started actually taking control. And here's really the thing: the way you start to take or minimize that stress is by taking control, is by accepting the situation you're in, taking a big picture look at it, and then making adjustments so that you can actually survive in it. And like I said, I mean, if you have to cut things, you cut things. And for a while there, I turned off. At that particular time, I did have cable or DirecTV. I dormanted it. I called them and said, okay, I want to shut it off for 6 months. And they just paused it and shut it off. And I turned off, everything I could possibly turn off, I turned off. The other thing to remember on this is that all of this is really temporary. It doesn't feel temporary, but realistically, things are going to change, right? In my situation, no matter what, the kids, once they turn 18, are going to start dropping, or turn 18 and graduate high school, are going to start dropping off. A lot of you folks out there are working on higher education to get better jobs. So realistically, at some point, you're going to be able to get a career and be dependent upon yourself. And that's the other part of this is, it's like, okay, this sucks right now, but it isn't going to be your life forever. 25 years from now, you're not going to be basically in the same situation you are. Now, I will say this: if you make bad decisions, you can extend the time for recovery on a lot of this and complicate things. And the thing is, the sooner you make better decisions, the sooner you'll be out of this. Like I said in the other video the other day, had I made different decisions, I would be out of most of my financial problems right now. But because I got frustrated and I didn't want to address this, and I didn't want to make that budget, and I didn't want to really tackle it head on, it created more problems. And the thing is, it's really important to look at your situation right now, what's going on right now today, and figuring out how to survive today. That if you can do that and not delete or spend your buffers or run up your credit cards and live in that environment right now, you'll be a lot better off. And there's things you can do. And it's a bitter pill to swallow. One of the examples of that for me was buying, used tires, right? I've never bought used tires. I've always bought, when you need tires, you buy a set of 4 tires. Well, whenever you have no money, you have to figure something else out. And I didn't even know about it. Someone else said, you can buy, people take tires in and they swap them out when they buy new rims and stuff like that. And sure enough, I was able to go to a couple of local tire companies and say, hey, I need two used tires. And they had them, and they were less money than brand new ones, and was able to keep me on the road. The hardest part about this is being frustrated to being forced to do something that you never had to do before. Or maybe you had to do when you were in your 20s and now you're in your 40s and you're like, are you kidding me? I'm basically been shot back down to where I was before. It's tough to deal with that. It's tough to reevaluate your life and accept that those changes have happened and that you have to deal with them. So to get back to the question of how do you deal with the stress whenever you have low income, it's accepting it, figuring out a budget that can work, looking for other resources that help you, because if your money is so low, you might have the opportunity for food stamps, or California has this thing called D-Care for electricity. There's different things that might be able to help augment it that you may not have ever considered or wanted to consider, and it may just irritate you that you have to do that. But that's the other part of it, is taking a look at your situation, not with the glasses of what your life was maybe a couple of years ago or before this situation happened, but looking at it right now. What is your situation right now and today? And then taking an objective look on what decisions you can make to survive in this situation. And I'll tell you guys, before I did the budget thing, I was scared to death to do it, because I was afraid that when I did the numbers that it wasn't going to work, and that I was going to be basically running a negative number every 2 weeks. It was close. I think my buffer for the longest time, up until things started to change and the kids got older and whatnot, like so daycare and stuff like that went down, is I had like an $80 a month buffer. $80 a month isn't that doesn't cover anything, right? I mean, so it's like medical issues come up, boom, you don't have money for it. You know what I mean? So, but I was able to survive, and I was able to maintain that. I mean, had I just spent, like if I had to do stuff on credit card, if I would have just done it for those emergency type issues, then a lot of the extra debt that I would have run up, I wouldn't have done. Now, I don't know if that necessarily answers the question, but that's really my philosophy on it. I think in some ways, I think if you were broke before and you're still broke, it might be a little easier because you're not comparing that you used to have money to, like when the fridge breaks, you were able to go take care of it. It wasn't a big deal. Or if you needed tires, you could just do it, or something happened. It's really tough whenever you had that stability before and now the stability is gone and you're dealing with the anger associated with the other person because you're blaming them for the situation and you're still trying to cope with it. So I'd love to hear how you guys are coping with, the stressors of low money and low income. Maybe you have some other ideas of what you've been able to do. I know on the Discord there's been discussions for people asking ideas on what do you do when you need to do something with your kids but you don't have any money. So there are things that you can do to still focus on building that relationship with your kids, focus on building good memories. You can actually make memories without money and eliminating a lot of the stress it's in your environment. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this video up. Hopefully you are having an outstanding day wherever you are, and I will chat with you on the next video. Take care, bye.